G'day guys. This is G'day guys. This is just a short video on the oxalate content of food. So I'll just quickly share my screen. So this is a file that I got off a website. So I'll just put it on my drive, so because you never know, sometimes these get lost, they get taken down, so it'll be on my drive connection. It's from a university site, so we can trust that the information is going to be much better than you get on the general sites. So they do provide the food groups in that regard, the food item, the serving amount, the oxalate category, whether it's very high or not, and for that amount, the oxalate value. So, for instance, avocados, one fruit, very high, 19 milligrams. So, yes, you know who you are, you avocado lovers. One of them happens to be my father, who I've been trying to convince to give up, even though he's got a bad knee, and he won't give up the damn stuff. Anyway, he tells me it's luxuries and enjoyments, but then he complains about his poor knee when he fell off the second floor, and they said it wrongly, and ever since it's caused him some grief. Yes, but anyway, arthritis. Yes, he's enjoying that part of life, and oxalates do have something to do with that as well. Anyway, the key thing is to be well aware, as Sally Norton has actually sort of promoted through the low-carb community, that people should avoid going over 50 milligrams per day. So they should technically stay below the, at maximum, at the top maximum, they should be at about 50 milligrams, no more. But generally speaking, it's best to avoid, to get, try and, if people are sort of low carb, some of my subscribers are, some of them are vegetarians, and I do encourage them to do more animal-based vegetarianism, which is basically seafood and things like seafood, which includes both fish and crustaceans to get the minerals. Crustaceans are really good for that purpose. The other thing is getting in the eggs, getting in the dairy, getting those things, depending on tolerance, there's all those other factors. But also some of the actual plants that they may be consuming, they need to really look carefully at sort of the oxalate numbers that are here. Obviously, if you're doing you're consuming a bit more dairy, that's going to help, because the more calcium that you consume, the better you will be at binding oxalate. Obviously, that will mean you won't absorb that calcium, but it'll also mean that it will actually reduce it. So if you're on a low oxalate diet and you're consuming some plants that are low oxalate, then you still end up getting more of that calcium. Anyway, now, so that's those sort of things. Generally speaking, the things that are very, very low are things like grapes, honeydew melon are very, very low in comparison. Apricots, little to none, are probably out of all the actual, most of the fruits. And again, nectarine, little to none, peaches, little to none, plums, those sort of things. So for those who do consume some of those things, well, that's that amount. Then when we look at vegetables, beets are pretty high, as you can see. So a lot of the beans are pretty high. Even olives are fairly that's approximately 10 olives, 18 milligrams. It doesn't take long to basically get too much into your system. Spinach is basically just hell on earth. You definitely want to avoid this nasty little thing. And cooked is even worse because it liberates a lot of them. So half a cup of cooked has 755 milligrams. It's just pretty much a killer to the body. So if we're 755, divide that by 50, we're talking about 15.1 times what your daily maximum intake should be. So pretty much spinach should be considered poison in terms of oxalate, not a health food for that level, especially a poison to the kidneys if taken continuously in high amounts. So there are different sort of foods, obviously. Kale is low, but again has a whole lot of other issues, which is not really good for your hormones and stuff like that. So I'd give that a complete miss for different reasons. But then you're looking at, and then broccoli again. There's the sort of endocrine disrupting effects. So as a better option for people who are also, whether they are vegetarian, whether they are low carb or transitioning to carnivore, look at things like cucumber. Gherkins would even be better because you're going to get rid of a lot of the anti-nutrients as well. So iceberg, most lettuces are very low. So most of these things, zucchini again is another one that's good transition, or just generally it's low carb as well. Sauerkraut, which is fermented, so that's a better option than cabbage. But also cabbage is low, but it's a better option as a fermented thing. Then we get into the potatoes. They are very high. So probably the potato salad is probably that's a third. So you're really looking at mashed potatoes in terms of quantity, and sweet potato in terms of quantity. 1 cup, you're well over, what's that, 28. Just 28 divided by 50, so about 56%. So yes, not looking good. That's pretty high as well. So things like anything which is a cream-based product isn't going to have really much. And even this cream sauce, it's really the plant component in there. Animal foods are pretty much non-existent. Yogurt products, plain yogurt, may have a bit, but generally not. Also, the ones with fruits, depending on the type of fruit, can vary. Cheeses are pretty much zero. The only one that's got very low is cottage cheese. Eggs, pretty much non-existent. Obviously, chocolate milk will have, because chocolate is pretty high. French toast, it sort of high for 2 slices, because they're also looking at the sort of quantities. So they're giving you a bit. So when you're on holidays, yes, we know some of you indulge on inappropriate foods like French toast. You know who you are. Anyway, there's a number of the grains. I mean, things like buckwheat, I mean, is really bad. And rice bran, no wonder the Asians removed the brand completely. Miso soup tends to be high as well, so not a good thing. And all the actual anything that is brown or whole bread, with the actual bran, anything like that's going to be high. Soy flour is high as well, 1 cup. And that includes, when it comes to soy, to all the soy products. So there's a lot of them out there. You'll find tofu, all these sort of things, which are all the protein substitutes that the vegans and vegetarians are using nowadays. They're very high in oxalate as well. So just 1 cup gives you 90. It's nearly double your daily amount that you should be getting. So it's terribly high. And if people are using that, and also bodybuilders that are using soy type isolates and stuff like that, they will have oxalate in them as well. You just can't remove it from it's part of the production. They break it down to very, obviously the crystals are going to be very tiny, but you're still getting them in there. So keep that in mind, and they can bioaccumulate in certain tissue. Over time, they can create problems. So if you're going to use anything, use bovine-based options rather than soy-based options. So you've got, obviously, corn flour is much lower. So it's hummus, all these sort of things. White rice cooked is lower. Barley, malt flour, corn bran, flaxseed, oat bran raw, they're all pretty low. So if your relatives are basically still eating kibble, these are sort of better options to recommend to them and give up some of the higher oxalate stuff. So this goes for all people, I mean, you're going to have family members that are not going to do the carnivore diet. Let's just be bluntly honest about it. So it's good to basically give them options and all that. As you can see, just 3.5 ounces of tofu, 13 milligrams. So it's quite a lot. So if you get a big amount of food, you can basically get anywhere between close to, we're talking about 39, nearly 40 just for a big meal of tofu. And then to add the plants, and you're way beyond the point of no return. And the same thing with veggie. Once you're getting over, like 10 milligrams for a small quantity of anything, it's really just too much, because it accumulates with all the other stuff, especially if you're eating more plants and things like that. So obviously all the, I have no idea why they have these, obviously because they burgers, the tofu stuff, but it's really annoying because they're part of meat and fish. But typical universities nowadays, they don't apply the right categories. Even fake stuff is getting into the wrong categories, according to me. Anyway, so obviously all the animal foods are pretty low. Obviously tuna salad, it's the salad part. It's fish sticks, obviously it's the plant component. It's not much, but still. in that regard. Just keep that in mind. And if your kids are getting this sort of stuff, make sure you're not frying it in seed oil, please. High deuterium and damaging to the child's body. Anyone, so obviously seafood is very, very non-existent. Then when we go to the nuts and seeds, almond is definitely the worst. So to be avoided completely. Same thing goes for cashews and pistachios, mixed nuts, pumpkin seeds. So don't consume too many of those. The seeds are the worst. Even walnuts have quite a lot, as you can see. 7 nuts, that's not a lot, 31 milligrams, very high. You can get your omega-3s a very easy way. It's called fish, seafood. Even crustaceans that have got hardly anything in terms of oxalate has got heaps and heaps of omega-3s. So you don't even have to eat fish. You can eat crustaceans, get minerals, get DHA, EPA if you're vegetarian. You know, I can't even see why somebody vegan, since it's not looking back at you and smiling. So why are you too concerned about that? Yeah, most of the nuts are going to have quite a lot. Just keep that in mind. It's just the nature of the stuff. Yeah, I'm surprised that they don't have in there macadamia nuts. I don't really know about that. I think they're very, very fatty. They don't really have much oxalate, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me. Obviously, chocolate, different things have different amounts depending on what they're combined with. These are all pretty much processed stuff and beverages and all that. Keep in mind, teas are very high. So obviously chocolate is very hot. Chocolate is going to be really high. So 1 cup is 65 milligrams, way over your amount. So avoid hot chocolate like the plague. You know, if you're going to have any chocolate, 1 piece, that's it for the whole day. So you got to keep it really, really to a bare minimum. So you're looking at a whole lot of other things like tea. So if you're having quite a few cups of tea, you can have 3 cups of tea. You can be up to 40, nearly 45 milligrams, as you can see. So tea isn't a good option, guys. Beyond some other issues with EGCG, which is touted as a hormetic thing, exercise a bit. Get yourself off the couch. That is also a hormetic stressor and doesn't give you oxalate. Plus, tea has a whole lot of other issues in terms of, as I said, the EGCG, the compound that they tout, it actually increases senescent cells, which I've done in the video. I've actually shown it. So not a good idea in general. You can get, you know, obviously coffee is much lower. So 1 cup, 2 milligrams. So I usually have about 3 cups, which I'm getting about, and that's actual, you know, if you get brewed coffee from a barista, that's even going to have less. It's going to have probably 1 cup, probably 1 milligram. So you can have three of those cups. You're going to get basically 3 milligrams for the whole day, which is very little. So coffee is better than tea in that regard. So as you can see, coffee, which is a cup, and this is the barista top. 1 milligram. So I was right on that. Didn't even look. But yeah, less. I knew from Sally that she said it was about half the regular stuff. So I cheated. I already knew. So anyway, milk chocolate is 7. It's moderate. So if you're giving your kid just one of those milk chocolate cups per day, it's not a deal breaker in that regard. So obviously all the other milks are pretty good. Beer, liqueurs, white wine, red wine. Most alcohols are, beer is probably the only one that's actually slightly higher. You'd have to drink to get to 40 or 30, you'd have to drink 10 cans. Now, I know some Aussies that are basically piss pots and most likely could get to those levels. Add the chips on top. Yeah, definitely. And then we've got a number of spreads and stuff like that we're looking at. Certain ingredients, obviously, all-purpose flour. Not a good thing. And you can see all these: cocoa powder, brown rice flour, cornmeal, soya flour, soy protein isolate, just 1 ounce, 27 milligrams for the veganerized bodybuilder for 1 ounce. And they're going to have more than 1 ounce. Let's be honest about this. So that's 28.333333 grams. So they may have 2 of those per day. They'll be already over the limit. Pretty much. Up to 54 milligrams. So not a good idea. Get some whey into you. So obviously all the sweeteners and stuff like that are going to be very low. Garlic powder, gelatin, honey, lard, molasses, all those sort of things. They're going to be very low. Not that you should be consuming those things. This is just for information purposes, not to say, oh, I can take that. Yeah, ignoring all the other ramifications. There is the deuterium side. There is all the other stuff as well, the high blood sugar, blah, blah, blah. So do keep that in mind, you oxalate zealots. Obviously, a few other things here. So this list is quite comprehensive. It even goes into Kellogg's, of all things. Look at the Kellogg's brand, cereal brand, all brand and all that. They're all bloody high as. Very high, the whole lot of them. There's half a cup, cup of some of them. So probably the just right fruit and nut is probably the out of the lowest out of all of them, because it's already up to 1 full cup, and it's only 13 compared to all the other ones, which are less than a cup and basically very high. Yes, so definitely not a good idea. And most of the mueslis and all that, they're very high as well. The other ones are all brand ones. They're basically high. And the only stuff that's actually very low, all the very like Fruit Loops, all the very sugary stuff. So you get an idea of what we're talking about here. Any 100% bran, just a third of a cup, 25. Have a whole cup, you're up to 75. It's just bananas, literally bananas. Yes, junk food are going to be slightly less. And so that is the entire list, guys. So I'll provide a link to that. So at least for those who are low carb, vegetarian, and those who are pretty much have family members that need to sort of say, well, maybe you should avoid these foods, and maybe these are better options for you that are going to be less deleterious long term to your joints, and generally you're going to avoid other issues like kidney stones, especially if you're predisposed to them, and things of that sort. So really important to take home message is get the information, pull it together, and utilize it to manage both yourself if you're transitioning to a carnivore diet, or basically your family members who may still want to consume some kibble, and you need to basically try and give them the best options. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the run through and my general humorous commentary. See yous.